All right, good evening, everyone. We are going to get started. Apologies for the delay. The clock isn't working. So we're going to call to order at 7:10. Welcome, everyone, to the May 2nd, 2024 Ipswich School Committee meeting. This meeting is being recorded. All right, so Jimmy, would you please read the district mission statement for us?
Yes. Ipswich Public Schools aspires to empower all students to be global citizens who are effective communicators, analytical problem solvers, and savvy consumers of information. We propose to do this through an emphasis on communication, critical thinking, creativity, self-management, perseverance, and collaboration. Students will be active partners in authentic learning, offering voice and choice and demonstrating competency.
Thank you. I'm going to ask everyone to speak into the mics so that we get heard at home. Okay, so for announcements tonight, the next school committee meeting is scheduled for May 16th at 7 p.m. in the middle school, high school ensemble room. The FEPI's working group will meet remotely on Tuesday, May 7th at 4:15. The policy subcommittee will meet remotely on Tuesday, May 7th at 5:30. The communications subcommittee will meet remotely on Wednesday, May 8th at 4:30 p.m. Town meeting is taking place on Tuesday, May 14th at the Dolan Performing Arts Center at 7 p.m. And finally, the STEAM Showcase is being held at the middle school, high school, lower gym, I believe, on May 16th from 5 to 7 p.m.
Kate, can I sneak in a quick thing? Regarding quickly our bowling event. Part of the agreement with the select board was to give an announcement, and although we didn't unnecessarily compare scores, I'm thinking that they believe they won, as according to their meeting.
Select board?
Yeah.
That's not surprising that they think that. Okay.
I didn't see the meeting, but they definitely apparently said
We won?
we won by 5. Anyway, so being good sports, I want to say congratulations to the select board, because we said that whoever lost would say that, so thank you.
Yep. Congratulations, select board, on winning. So did we come in second, or?
Again, there was no comparison to scores. I'm just
Players
remembering
are
how we
very
did.
competitive.
What?
Thank
Oh,
you.
I thought you were just.
Other announcements tonight? All right, special acknowledgements. Are there any special acknowledgements?
I have several.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for starters, the cast and crew and the directors of Legally Blonde that was performed this past weekend. I understand that everyone did a fabulous job and raised the bar once again on our fine arts program, so congratulations to them. This weekend, our middle school art teacher, Brianna Stewart, and some of her students have had a piece of artwork that's been accepted into a show this weekend called Out of the Blue. The exhibit is going to be at the EBSCO Hall on 5 Petefield Street on Saturday from 10 to 5:30 and Sunday from 10 to 4. So congratulations to Brianna and her students. What makes it special is that student art is typically not accepted into the show, and this piece made the cut. And then finally, Gabby Archambault and Sarah Trotsky, shout out to them. They are our EL teachers here at the middle and high school. And shout out for the work that they did with the multilingual leaders group, their showcase that they put on last night, and the book that they actually published this year, which I have a copy of. It's called We Are America. Ipswich, Voices of the Nation's Future, by our multilingual students. So great job in that program. It's amazing the work that they do with those students. Yeah.
Other copies? Or?
I don't have other copies. That's the only one that they sent me.
Do we have other special acknowledgements tonight? I just will second the Legally Blonde performance was pretty impressive, and I believe it did raise the bar. I was really impressed, and I liked the article in the paper that quoted a lot of students that just said it was such a great experience, such a great thing to be a part of, and they were just, seemed very grateful to be a part of that production here. And I also think it's great that the students were really from all 4 grades. I mean, it was really, some of the leads were not seniors. I mean, they were, younger kids. So I think the pipeline is really strong for our theater program. So it was great to see.
And I'll second or third that, I guess, but we went, and I think it might have been the best production that we've been to, and I'd like to point out that last winter, there was a lot of talk about fear of not having a strong theater program, and to see the most amazing production I've ever seen at Ipswich High School, I just think speaks volumes to our dedication to our theater program.
All right. So next up, we have remarks from the chair. I don't have any this evening. So we will move on to public comments. Looks like we have a few people to speak for public comments, so I'll just read my little disclaimer about public comments. Public comments are not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. Public comment represents an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. With that, I will welcome anyone to the microphone who has public comments tonight. Okay, so just ignore that disclaimer, and we're happy to have you here watching. Okay.
Want to see this over there?
Sure. Yeah. All right. So, moving on. High school student representative report. Jimmy.
All right. So tonight I wanted to talk about some of the different leadership opportunities available to students, just to kind of spread the word. I also wanted to talk about the policies that have changed for students this year, throughout the year, and the communication between staff, administration, and students, and then just some basic bridge information for the general public this year. Ipswich offers so many different opportunities for students, from clubs to sports to community service to then leadership positions. For those who aren't aware, some of the student positions available for election in our high school are seats on the Student Advisory Council, seats on the Student Council itself, and the Student Advisory Council does include one student that will be then elected amongst that group to then attend the school committee as a student rep. In addition, there are 4 different class officers per each class that are elected. And then there's also the peer mentoring program, which isn't really an election, but it's an application, and you have to be nominated by different teachers to be able to be in that position. And all these opportunities give students experience on communicating with adults and having productive conversations and addressing the concerns or wishes of the student body that they're representing. Moving on, this year there have been many different policy changes and rule switch-ups for students. Some have been easy and some have been difficult for students to adjust to. So far this year, going back towards the beginning of the year, there were a lot of different changes that the library had made around different lunch rules and regulations, which had started last year with more students after the pandemic wishing to eat lunch in the library, which that's what that space is there for in part. However, the rules kept switching and students kept getting really confused about what the policy is. Students now, or at some point during the year, had to then start signing up to be able to eat lunch in the library, and then now it's like only 10 students per lunch can go there. So it just has like changed and changed and changed, and some students are showing up to eat lunch and they're being turned away and sent back to the class. So it's just a miscommunication there between the administration and the library staff, then communicating the new rules to the students and making sure that that line of communication is there. Additionally, students had to get used to the hall pass system, which was a big change. There were a amount of students that had been told that a specific group of students were unable to go where they needed to go and follow the teacher's instructions, which resulted in the high school enforcing a new hall pass system, which I don't know if that's a whole mess of a policy, but basically, despite being told that the teachers were the ones that wanted the policy, different teachers and staff members have told their classes and told their students that they don't agree with the hall pass policy and that they don't support it when they were the ones that brought it on potentially. Like, that's what we were told at least, which is just creating a little bit of entanglement and confusion, like, okay, if you didn't want it, we didn't want it, who wanted the policy, why are we doing this, why do we have this policy in the first place? Like, doesn't really make sense, and it puts students in that weird position of like, what's going on? Or why should we listen to the administration if they're not even following their own rules? Like, it's a weird dynamic to be in. Some teachers haven't even kept up with the hall pass system per the administrator's standards. Each teacher has dealt with the hall pass system themselves, like where it's different from class to class, which kind of defeats the purpose if you're supposed to have a hall pass for a certain zone and it's not being done unanimously. It doesn't work then. It's not what it was in place for, so why do we have it? And then moving on to the Bridge program, for those who don't know, Mr. Wood and Mr. Harvey are two teachers in the high school that organize the program, run it, help students find job placements, and really they're there for any sort of questions or whatever students need. They're really hands-on and they're really helpful. Specifically, the program allows students to get experience in the workforce and go off campus, while some students technically do stay on campus in the middle school / high school, working with those students. But anyways, the program offers students real experience instead of attending their required courses in quarter 4. Some students that are taking AP or advanced placement courses or virtual classes, which is kind of ironic, have to come back to school to attend those because they're just a different caliber of class. And typically students that are going on Bridge are able to make that work and still come back to school for those classes and be able to get that experience. But this year there's been a little bit of a switch up with the Bridge policy for students taking AP courses and VHS courses, where after those courses are finished, after the AP exam or the VHS year ends, students are still going to be required to come back, even if they're not moving forward with any curriculum. Lots of times, some AP courses, and the VHS is different because it's through a teacher that's not associated with Ipswich High School, so after that's over, they're left sitting like twiddling their thumbs, doing whatever else they want to do. But for AP courses, some of them do really cool labs and activities, while some just sit and watch movies or just sit there and melt in the classroom, which is unfortunate because the students that are on Bridge could then take that time and get that extra experience for those 1 to 2 weeks, and if that can make or break an experience for them. But that was just changed mid-Bridge, where it could have been they had all year to make that switch, and they waited till students were already immersed in their Bridge program, getting used to their schedule, and then that was a change that they weren't expecting, and it's just unfortunate that the communication is not there, that through 3/4 of the year when you were anticipating Bridge, and students were having Bridge meetings throughout the year to make sure that you were being up to the academic requirements and all the other requirements that go into it. So it had been a very anticipated thing, so it doesn't make sense for administration and those two teachers to not say, it's just is another one of those where the communication is lacking, unfortunately. But hopefully through the advisory council and all those other leadership positions next year, we can really tighten that down and make sure that everyone is in the loop at all times. If anyone has any questions or anything, happy to.
So you've given this feedback to the administrators?
Yes.
Through the advisory council?
Yeah, and just through one-on-one meeting too.
No, that's good, because those are the folks that need to hear it.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Makes sense if you can nail down policies at the beginning of the year, but I understand it might be hard
Yeah.
sometimes.
I think it definitely adds, going back to the hall pass, such a frustration you were saying with, I'm not sure, the people who are doing the policy.
Yeah.
And unnecessary stress
Yeah.
for students. And how does that work in terms of, if a teacher has a problem with, how should it work? If a teacher has a problem with a policy and deals with it like that in front of the students, I'm assuming they talk to the people who are doing the policy.
Yeah.
But to relate that to the students when the students, can't really do anything about it, it's just really, wow, I'm surprised I wasn't talking into the microphone. Oh, it's okay, I got it.
Get it, okay.
I got it. Oh, it's not just me.
That's scary.
They have to be closer? Mine does to be
We're
closer.
gonna try that. That's what Brian's suggestion is.
Oh,
So am I the only one that can talk?
So.
none of ours work?
Folks who are watching, we're having an issue with the microphones this evening, so.
We all have to go over to Kate.
Committee members, just please make sure that you're speaking directly into the microphones.
Through mine. Apparently mine works.
So yes, I was just wondering how that typically works, if there's a frustration with the policy, is that okay, or,
It should be a conversation with the administration.
right?
Teachers and the administrations and the teachers and the administration in a faculty meeting.
Right, and they all should be consistent, like you were saying with the hall passes and stuff.
Much better.
You may speak in the mic, yeah, if it works, I don't know.
I didn't see you come in, I'm sorry, I would have turned it
So
over.
the hall pass idea came from the teachers. The teachers requested of the administrators.
Okay.
And that's what students were told, which is why it is so frustrating, because we're being told the teachers wanted it, but then 5 out of 7 classes, the teacher has a debrief after the presentation and is like, I don't think you guys need this, I don't know why we're doing this, and then it's like, okay, well,
Right.
I would agree with that. So it's kind of students don't need to be put in that position,
Right.
but also it shows the students that there's a lack of communication between the staff and administration, which then is like, oh, what's going on? Like, the students are seeing some cracks that might be there. It doesn't bode well.
Good point.
And the other stuff we were talking about before you came in, which sounds like you've probably heard at school council, is the policy's changing mid-year. Sometimes might be confusing for students, but probably necessary at some point too. Any other questions for Ginny? When is your last meeting with us? Are you going to stay through? You don't have to tell me right now, but if you know.
I think so. That was the plan. Potentially, depending on when the next student advisory council gets assembled and everything, it might make sense for the new student rep to take over on one of the later June meetings to then
Okay.
kind of get a smoother transition.
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
But just depends on when that all happens. But
Okay,
Sounds
but it's
like
being
we're-
voted on this
yes.
spring, not in the fall. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. All right, so moving on to discussion and vote on hiring of the pupil personnel services director. So we had a conversation about this in executive session and learned about the candidates. You want to say anything? Or do we just?
No, I think, we had an extensive interview process. The name that I'm placing in nomination to the school committee this evening is Mr. Eric Oxford. Eric Patrick Oxford.
Yep, so we had a pretty good discussion, looked at resumes, talked about the interview process, talked about the other candidates, and then sort of the reasons that Dr. Blake is bringing this forward to us. So I think, unless there's any further questions or anything, I would entertain a motion to support hiring of Eric Oxford for the Pupil Personnel Services Director position effective June 30th, 2024.
So moved.
Second. So moved by Jen, second by Diana. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? 7-0. He seems like a really great candidate. So I think it seems like he really wants to be here, will fit in really well with our district. So we look forward to getting him on board for that important position.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to review of high school handbook changes and potential vote of approval. We have Mr. Mitchell here. We have in our folder a draft chemical health rule with highlights in yellow.
Is that this is the updated one. So the we had some questions come from school committee members just today that were circulated, and so I sent out the policy to legal counsel just for a quick review, and they sent it back, so what you have is the updated policy coming around.
And those changes are not in this.
It looks like they are now.
There are some red, I see some red in here.
In the third paragraph, the second line says, but Ipswich High School retains sole discretion in determining appropriate level of discipline. Came from the attorney. That was an ad. On that first page, where it says first offense, completion of minimum 4-hour service learning project related to the topic of substance abuse, prior approval from the principal, and then they added that phrase, as to the specific topic required. And then the last page, in the last paragraph, says the school will notify students, second line was added, the school will notify students during the school year that the violation occurs, whether penalties will carry over to the following year. Those are the only changes from what the school council came up with. So the change to this policy was prompted by the events of last October, where a lot of parents complained that there was nothing in black and white in the handbook. We talked about our expectations around underage drinking and drug use. So this is language that the school council worked on at, I think, 4 meetings, maybe 5. So several meetings was a topic of a big chunk of the meeting. And so over time, we revised this with the idea that one of the issues that people brought forward were that why the athletes being penalized and no one else? So this should apply to everybody. And I thought maybe originally extracurricular activities and athletes, but then they said, well, why not, if the goal is educational, then why not make it apply to all students? Yeah. So we decided to explore that option. So given that athletics and extracurricular activities are a privilege, not a right for student participation, we thought that we could apply this. I'm glad that the legal team supported that idea. So if you remember, in the past, when we would get a list of names from the police of students who were at a party, we would apply our interpretation of the MIAA rule, which in the past was in the presence of alcohol. It wasn't stated, but that's been our past practice. So in order to make sure that we made the distinction clear, we put that in the presence of underage drinking or drug use in here. But at the urging of parents who attended our school council meetings, we decided to make the first offense for that to be purely educational, which is why we have, instead of having a suspension for 25% of the season for a first offense, for being in the presence of, they have to do a 4-hour service learning project. For the second offense, for being in the presence of, it would be, according to this, suspension for the next athletic contest, which is just one athletic contest, not 25% of the season, which would be substantially more. And then leadership positions may be revoked immediately. So that would be like captaincies or club president, anything like of that nature. And then attendance at school functions would be prohibited for up to 45 days at the principal's discretion. So part of the idea of this, and the language is contained in a couple of different places in the policy, that we don't want these penalties to compound, meaning that if a student is an athlete but also a member of a club, we don't want them to get zapped in both places. So it would be at the discretion of the principal to determine which one would be impacted, but not both. So we're still in place if there's students charged, either being summoned by the police or being under the influence or in possession of. That's when the old policy that we would enforce, which would be 25% of the season for the first offense and 50%, I believe it was, a while ago. But it would just follow the MIA policies for the second and subsequent offenses. We did have language in here that, obviously the nature of, just like everything else here with discipline, we look for progressive discipline. It's going to drive us. So we try to start with like the lowest intervention for the first offense, and then with subsequent offenses, as long as they're not severe, have, if the first offense is not severe, we won't zap someone really hard, but with each subsequent offense, obviously the consequences get ramped up. So I don't know if I captured anticipated all the questions you might have, but I'm open to answer questions that you have as I review that document.
So I had emailed a couple of questions to you earlier, just to try to not spring them on you at the meeting, and give you a little bit of time to think about them. So my questions were, are the first and second offenses for the police verified in the presence of per academic school year or over a high school career? Like if you,
It's not intended to be for more than a year-to-year thing. But if there's an offense that happens at the end of 1 year, then obviously the next year would be impacted.
and then this probably isn't maybe your question to answer, but has any thought been given to the need for a similar policy at the middle school?
I mean, that'll be up to the middle school administration, but I don't think it's a bad idea.
And I guess my third question is, where will it live?
It will be included in the student handbook
The parent-student
and in the athletics
and in the
handbook.
athletic handbook. Okay. And then if it's in the parent-student handbook, the sections that are currently in the parent-student handbook, there's one on drinking and one on drugs. Would those go
So there's
away?
a couple different places where there's drinking in the student parent handbook. One has to do with in school, like if the students are found with it in school,
Right.
that would still be there, but this would be for anything that's outside of school.
Yeah, I just want to make sure those, because part of the issue is we have this policy and it's clear, but then other policies that are tangentially related are vague. I want to make sure they're
Right,
all
so
sort of
we have,
synced
so
up.
this took way more time than I thought it was going to revise this, because I wanted to bring additional policy changes, because the handbook hasn't been revised for a long time, so.
Yeah.
We have a draft of next year's handbook going, so I'm gonna make sure that we address that, so
Okay.
the language is all consistent, and then we'll notify the legal team to make sure it's.
Okay. So we can expect a later presentation on the
Yes.
rest of the
Yep.
changes.
Yep.
Great. I think my final question is, just would it be worth, I've noticed some other districts had links to the MAA language in particular, if anyone wanted to go out to that site, or if there was any Cape Ann League. I think there was
Sure.
some language about Cape Ann League.
There's some language around the Cape Ann League, so if you're found, the first offense would be, if in possession of, charged with or possession, if you're under the influence or in possession, that you would be losing your captaincy for that particular season and be ineligible for postseason awards. We can put that in there.
Jeff, sorry.
I just have a quick one. Is a first violation for a police charge or summons possession, does that include the requirement to do the 4-hour service project?
No, that would go right to the loss of eligibility.
So I wonder if maybe it does, because again, the purpose of that is education. So if you've already been deemed to be in possession, and you may have some of that through a police or a court proceeding handbook, but
Right.
maybe it's
That's
a
probably true.
And I see that you did remove, I think today, the automatic loss of elected participant for the next academic year. So I think at
Yeah,
one point
the
earlier-
lawyer recommended language around,
I see the addition
Yeah.
below that it's
Yeah.
at the discretion that they
Yeah.
be carried over. I think that's a good change though.
Yeah.
To not make it an automatic.
Yeah.
next year too.
yeah.
Where was that changed?
It's not highlighted, but it was, under the first violation, a student would lose any elected or appointed leadership position for the remainder of the academic year. The version that was there earlier today said, and then next.
Second.
Correct.
I agree, it's a good change.
Yes. So do you think there would be an issue with like the words maybe or at the discretion as opposed to like this will happen or this will happen? For parents to say like, well, this person got that and not this, so I don't know if that would be confusing and perhaps frustrating for parents, but I want to hear what you think.
We did talk about the additional burden on the principal that would mean, because a shall is a lot easier to nail. Hey, that's what it says. The
Right.
may, a lot of parents talked about, well, there should be some discretion because every case is going to be different, so you don't want to be handcuffed. There was some concern in school council about me having to deal with a lot of different cases, but I think the may kind of gives a little bit of flexibility because some cases might be more severe than others.
Right,
So,
okay.
for example, if a student shows up at a party for 15 minutes, is arrived, and the police come and take their name down, versus a student who's there for 2 hours.
Right.
There's a little bit more wiggle room. Having
Right.
applied the same blanket policy.
Right. How would you know that? I'm just curious, how would you know how long they were?
Based on what the students would say and what the police would report.
Thank you.
Kind of adding on to what Jenny was saying, especially like the discretion piece of it, where some students might be involved in a number of activities and they might be on all their leadership positions and their captaincies and this, but like, how is that going to be done? Because maybe there's multiple cases where somebody got this taken away, got this taken away, and they're all multiple things, so it's like, why is this getting taken away for this person? Like, how do you evaluate that or plan to?
Yeah, so it's gonna have to be a case-by-case thing. So that, the scenario we thought up was, what if someone is playing a sport, but they're also the lead in the play? And the play only happens, for one weekend. And so, in that situation, you hit them with a sports penalty, but let them be in the play, because there's only one time they get the chance to be in that play. And it affects the entire ensemble, not just the team.
First of all, thank you. This was a lot of work, and I did go to one of the council meetings. I do think it's a positive change in the first offense and second offense. I do, and I think I said this at the council meeting, that I still have a little bit of concern because it feels like a gray area under policy verified and the Ipswich High School student who is substantiated by law enforcement. Can you speak to the process of, what do other districts do surrounding us?
That's a good question.
And what does substantiated by law enforcement exactly mean? Are you going to be handed to make those decisions about the 15-minute person at the party versus the 2-hour person?
Right, right. So that was a language that, maybe that's a legal terminology, substantiated by law enforcement, because it used to say confirmed by police. But to answer your first part of your question, I asked all the other Cape Ann League principals what they do, and they said they only address it if someone has been charged for possession or under the influence. If that's not the case, then they don't deal with it.
So how is Ipswich going to define substantiated by law enforcement?
Typically, it's a police report.
Police will,
Yeah.
the onus seems to be on the police, or it wouldn't come to you unless it was police substantiated.
Well, I guess, and this isn't about you, but I guess my confusion is you had incidents, like you said last October, where there was a police report, but no one was charged. There were other incidents earlier in the year where people were charged. Like, what is substantiated by law enforcement in Ipswich related to Ipswich High School students?
So if the student is charged with something, the police say the students were charged with. But if they're present at the party, it just says that these students were at the party. So the police, the reason why they didn't charge kids in the past was they thought they were kind of doing them solid. They didn't want to have kids have police record for being at a party.
Right.
So they would just give a list of names of kids who were there and then expect us to deal with it, which is kind of nice for the kids because they don't have a record, but it puts a lot of burden on the school to have to contend with consequences, especially when the kind of numbers that we had last October.
So I'm still just not clear on the next time this happens.
We don't have parties in town.
Well,
Right, it's going to happen.
that is kind of what's happening.
Right. Yep. That would be great.
Well,
I just don't understand it. It feels gray, and I feel like it opens up more criticism to you in the future when substantiate, what does that mean? Are you being handed a list?
Like document, I would say just substantiate would be like documented, like a list of students. Yeah.
And then the other Cape Ann League, they just follow MIAA? Like,
If they're charged with being in possession or under the influence, that's when they enforce the MIA chemical health policy.
Can I follow up on that? So, for the districts you looked at, do any other districts have in their policy being in the presence of underage drinking, or is it only charged with possession?
So several years ago, the MIA moved away from that language. That language used to be there, in the presence of, but I think they just took a lot of heat for that, so they took it out. So districts are free to have a stricter policy if they want, and so we, in our practice, had enforced a stricter policy that did not match what we had in black and white, in writing. So that was one of the goals here, to make sure that our expectations are clear in writing, so that everyone knows what we expect of them.
Are other districts following that or leading that, the being in the presence of?
No.
So just to clarify, they don't have the in the presence of?
They do not.
They do not.
It's not written in there. I don't know
It's not.
I don't know how they've interpreted that with their enforcement policy or practices, but they don't have it in writing in their handbooks.
Okay. I think that there's a lot of circumstances, I remember in high school, that perhaps people didn't know that there was alcohol, and that might seem far-fetched, but I think it's a real thing that, children, whomever, was in a home and not know that, a couple people may have it. That may seem, I know that sounds naive, but you're like, it is. That's what I did in high school. I did not know. But anyway,
I guess the question is, are the police considering this a black and white issue? Or do they make a judgment call on that as to whether or not? Are they just handing you a list?
They don't breathalyze, first of all, when they get to a party, typically. And they just want everyone to be safe. So they typically call parents and have parents come and pick them up. And in that process of calling parents, they get a list of names. So the police are not very interested in having to go through charging 20, 25 kids. It's a lot of work. And again, like I said, they don't want them to have a record. But I think if something is egregious, like if someone's under the influence, falling down, like needing to be taken to the hospital, I think they would probably be charged for being under the influence. Or if they caught a couple kids carrying a keg into someone's house.
Yeah.
I think that would be possession.
Right, those are clear cut, yeah. In the presence of, though, does seem a little bit, or potential for a little bit nebulous, in that the scenario that Jenny brings up is maybe far-fetched, but I guarantee you it has happened. And although I do like the fact that we have softened that first offense, and I don't know if I think I'm thinking out loud, so I apologize. But I am a little concerned about the presence of, because I just feel like there is some gray area there if the police aren't making that determination, but we are.
Oh, if the police give us a list. So if
Right.
the police would give us a list of students who were there in the presence of underage drinking, that would be our action point. That would be when we would say, okay, you were in the presence of underage drinking.
Right, but if there's 2 kids in the basement and all the kids are upstairs,
Then we would hope that our student athletes and leaders would realize that there's alcohol at the party and leave.
okay.
so I think, I'm just replaying this all in my mind, and I said this at the council meeting, and so I'll say it again here. In the presence of does not allow a student leader or a person to say, I want to be here, but no thanks. I'm an athlete. I potentially, and I'll just use the example that I used at the council meeting. You have a scholarship athlete, potential student at a party, and they say, nope, I'm going to get in trouble if I drink. It's there. I'm just here. I'm not going to. I used the example of Eddie DeWald, hi Eddie, from 1986 at my high school in New Jersey, he was on the Naval Academy track. He was a wrestler, he was a football player, and occasionally he came to a party and there was alcohol. But Eddie didn't drink, and he made the choice, nope, that's not what I want to do. And everybody respected that. And we're not giving these kids a chance to say, no, I want to be here, but I'm not going to drink. And I think it also opens Ipswich up to a lot of liability, because if that scholarship athlete is at a party in the presence of, but has chosen not to drink, but then has titles stripped and loses a potential scholarship, that's $250,000 that family is going to come after Ipswich for potentially taking away that scholarship.
I understand your argument. First, the first offense for in the presence of is a 4-hour community service project. It's not loss of any kind of scholarship or anything like that. And to extend your argument, I know it's kind of an exaggeration, but imagine we have a group of kids shoplifting in town. And one kid, I'm not going to shoplift, but all their friends shoplift. They're still in the presence of someone who's breaking the law. And if they get picked up by the police, they could be charged with shoplifting, justifiably. So I don't necessarily buy I'm going to be in the presence of something I know is illegal, but I'm not going to participate. I don't think it necessarily absolves you of responsibility.
With all due respect, I don't know that that's the best metaphor, but
Well, I mean,
maybe.
I admitted that when I started. I can't think of a better metaphor off the top of my head, but it's the same concept.
If somebody's, speeding on the highway and the passenger is in the passenger seat, the passenger doesn't get charged with a moving violation. The driver does. So I think that might be a better metaphor. But going back to, I think this still puts you in the presence
On the
of.
flip side of that, if there's alcohol in the car, everybody's getting charged with possession. If you're driving a car with an open container, everybody in the car is getting charged with possession.
Okay. I don't know that law, but.
Happened to my friends in high school, so I know that.
Okay.
We're all going back to high school to first step.
So I still believe that, and going back to past circumstances, you're in a tough position with substantiated by law enforcement and in the presence of, and back to your example of if somebody's at the party for 15 minutes or 2 hours, it's then you interviewing the student and making a decision. Would that interview and the results of that interview, if you said, okay, this person was there 15 minutes and I believe that person, versus the next person who was there for 2 hours, their names are just on a list,
Right.
right? So it puts you in the position of having to interview and believe or not believe to make a decision about penalty.
Yeah, because the police wouldn't know who was there longer. Right.
This feels gray. It feels like it might be a repeat of past. Past experiences.
Is it possible that you would not always get a police report if it was? It's the only
Yes.
ones that come to you or to us
Right.
with a police report, which, in my guesstimation is hopefully only for like substantial parties with a number of students where I feel like this is a real.
I'm pretty sure that almost every weekend, there's a party going on where there's underage drinking, and I've only gotten one police report this year.
I think that's fair to say. I mean, I don't know. Underage drinking age is 21. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I worry that we are getting into the realm of
That's been my argument all along, is I can't have a policy in the books that shows any kind of tacit approval of underage drinking from high school.
I don't think
kids.
that was the position. We should be in the, I don't think that's fun to be in. So, I mean, I think, I have a lot of respect for all the work that the school council did on this. I think it's a big improvement. It has a lot more clarity.
I agree, I like the specificity of it. I think the addition of the first offense is very bad. I think it's really, when you report and addresses all of that.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Yeah, sorry. I appreciate the specificity in it, including this about the first offense. It's a nice addition, it clarifies a lot of what was known before. And we've talked around it, but just to say it explicitly, this applies to situations outside of school hours and outside of school grounds. That's a little bit more where my concern is, where I think some of the liability that has been brought up, it's the only place in the handbook that something like this exists. My recommendation is if we proceed that way, first, some of my concerns with council, we should make sure that we address in that way. Second is if we proceed that way, that it explicitly states that up front, that it's not just within school grounds, but it's outside, which might be in public or personal or private residences. So we should be clear there to the parents that are signing it. I would agree with the piece about, let's just be clear on the, in the presence of and how that applies. I understand the need, and I think the flexibility that it gives you is appropriate. It's also in line with the flexibility in some of the other situations in the student handbook that we've talked about, so I think that makes sense. But with the intention of being more clear, I think that would be helpful to understand what that looks like. How would this apply in situations where there's been concerns about use within the school, in particular the piece about in the presence of? So where there's been concerns about drug use in the bathrooms or anywhere in the school, how does that apply to other students that are around when that's taking place?
Good question. So there's a separate part of the handbook that addresses drug and alcohol use inside the school, so we can make sure that we have some specificity around that too.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, especially in the case where it gets reported by students, parents, whatever it is, that entire class, the entire cafeteria. So we understand that, and at least that's included in here in a similar way.
Which is one of the reasons why students have been afraid to go to the bathroom sometimes, is because they don't want to go in because of vaping.
Gosh.
That's my next point, so thank you, yes. I had a similar question about middle school, whether it applies there or whether there are middle school students present. I think also just for clarity, I think that'd be helpful.
So it would apply to students who, like, if they're 8th graders who signed a waiver to participate in high school sports, then it would apply to them.
Does that need to be in the middle school handbook in the same way?
It probably should. Yeah. I mean, in the interest of transparency, I think it's a good idea.
Yep. So I would suggest that. There was a question already about how would you confirm events above and beyond what was included in the police report. I think that would also help to understand and be clear on expectations as students or parents are asked about that at a later time as well. Yeah, I think in general with those, I think there's some additions to increase the clarity. I like how far it's gone, but to increase that. And then, again, I'll review my one concern is that within the school grounds for field trips, athletic events totally makes sense. I have some concerns about how this can be applied outside of the school grounds. That's what I think we need to follow up about.
Can I just ask, are these folks all part of your school council?
He's been to a couple meetings, and Wendy's been a member since I've been here for 6 years, so.
Okay. Thank you for your work on this.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
A couple more things. And yes, thanks, everybody, for work on this. I just want to say, I don't condone, and I think I can speak for everybody in this room, I don't believe anybody condones underage drinking, so I don't want that twist thrown out there on anything I'm going to say. One, I have a thought, then some questions. One thought I have is just how this is applied, again, being in the presence of, how does that apply to somebody who might want to be the designated driver, which is a safer option than saying, no, we're just going to have the people who drink and the people who don't. So that is something I think, again, it's that gray area. How do we not condone underage drinking, but mostly make sure nobody's getting behind the wheel? So after that, my questions were the consistency of the police reports. Like, I don't have an appreciation of what that process looks like. Like, you know, you're saying, oh, there might be parties here, there, and everywhere, but you're only getting one report. So how do we ensure that this is, if it's being applied, that it's being applied fairly? What is the relationship with the police? What if there's a party in a, you know, neighboring town? So that's one question I have. And then to clarify, for the person in the presence of the underage drinking, is that somebody who's in the presence, is the substantiation in the presence of somebody else who's being charged with possession, as it's outlined in Part 2?
Not sure I know what you mean.
So you're saying there's a party and there's a list of people that were in the presence of it. Is that assuming that somebody at that party, at least one other person or multiple people, are then have to be charged with underage
Now I
drinking?
get it. So the answer to that is no. So if the police break up a party with underage drinking and they give us a list of like the following students were at this party, they would be in the presence of. Unless it says also so-and-so, date of birth, blah, 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 was under the influence. Then they would be charged. They would themselves would move down to the more severe level, while everyone else who was just in the presence would still be at the first offense, assuming it was their first offense.
Right, so there would be, say there was 10 people at a party, one person is they have to be charged with possession, but the other 9 would then be in the presence of? Like, at least one person would have to have a charge?
No.
No? Okay, is that what you were asking?
It's a good
I
question.
think you're being more specific. I think what you're asking is, what proof do the police have other than empty cups, right?
Yeah.
Sitting around,
The
like,
police walk into a basement and there's a bunch of half-filled red Solo cups and a bunch of students standing around like this, and there's empty beer cans on the floor. It's pretty safe to assume that someone had been drinking. So they were in the presence of it. Maybe they weren't holding it, but they were in the presence of underage drinking.
but no one has been charged.
But no one would be
Right, is that
charged.
what you're asking?
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
question.
Which is why there'd be
Yeah.
the first offense, which is completion of the 4-hour service learning project.
Okay.
But it could be the same scenario, second offense, and no one's charged. You're still just getting a list of in the presence
Which
of.
has never happened. In the 6 years, it's an annual thing. We get a police report with a bunch of kids' names on it, and it hasn't happened for a second time in the same school year.
With the whole in the presence of, it's just thinking back to a couple months ago when students and parents and administration sat through the presentations that we had from the speakers, which one of the speakers, the woman, had talked about her daughter, and the message there was not that you can't or you shouldn't go out and drink, it was to do it safely and to have those precautions, have a designated driver, make sure that you're taking care of those around you. So for just like support that message and then put this in is a little like, okay, where are we going?
Well, we can't support that message as a school or an administrator because drinking underage is legal. That might be a position a parent might choose to support on their own, but I think we cannot.
To have a speaker come in and share that message.
So I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It seems inconsistent.
Yeah.
I think the speaker had very practical advice for kids who get into real-life situations that I know probably happen on a weekly basis. But the difference is, this is a school policy, and it can't in any way say that it's okay to do that.
Sure.
It's just, I can't, just like I can't say, hey, if you're late to school, why don't you speed to get here? You know, just,
Right.
I can't do that either. As much as I want people to be on time, I can't encourage them to speed.
But at the same time, we, you know, I think the schools probably want to educate students on real life circumstances. Not condoning it, but, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of another example, and I can't right now, but, okay.
And, sorry, just one last comment I missed in my notes. Similar to explicitly including that it's outside of school grounds, does this only apply in Ipswich?
You mean, do other places have the same rules? No.
No, I mean, if an Ipswich student is in a different town or out of state, how does that apply? And
So I suppose,
based on how you
yeah,
determine it, then
If
I
we
don't think
have,
it's
if we have a video of someone doing a funnel shot or, at spring break somewhere, then yeah, that's, I would say if it's out of state, doesn't matter. This will apply.
I think similar specificity here would be helpful.
I mean, I think if you just, whether it occurs on campus or off campus, I just jot it down a little note. Yeah.
This is all, would it be a video? Because this talks about both categories are police verified.
Right.
So have to be police verified from a different place. Okay.
I'm not gonna be sneaking in people's bushes, but not. If it comes across my desk, I have to deal with it.
But if
So
an-
these are designed to help me deal with things as they come up. I'm not knocking on the IPD's door saying, hey, any parties this weekend? You got any list of kids? Can you get out there and, bust some kids for me? That's not what I'm about. But when they drop something on my desk, I have to have some policy to deal with it consistently. So that's what I've been looking for.
Yeah, no, and I certainly support you having something consistent to go with, but yeah, I guess I just have I think there's some gray area that sometimes it's good to have gray area, sometimes it's good to tighten things up, and I think I'm just trying to wrap my head around that.
The consensus of the school council over the course of our meetings was that it's probably better, they were concerned about me, or whoever succeeds me someday, hopefully a long time down the road. But they thought that a little bit of discretion was better than not enough. A little bit more is better than not enough.
Just to clarify, you could have just said, the MIAA is the floor, we can go higher. We're going to take up, in the presence of, could follow their schedule.
We could have, yes.
And instead, you chose to kind of have a tiered approach for in the presence of and possession, and leave yourself discretion, so it's a little bit more adaptive.
It's more my style to try to build consensus. So the school council is a great forum for that. It has teachers, it has parents, it has kids. So we try to listen to all the stakeholders and come up with something that makes sense and is enforceable. And I think we did that.
So given all this feedback and questions tonight, do you feel like you want to change anything and come back to us with the rest of the high school? Just wait, I have another option. To come back with the rest of the high school changes and vote on them as a whole? Or do you feel like this policy is ready to be voted on
Yeah,
tonight?
I can do that. I mean, I can take the feedback
I'm
from
not
tonight.
suggesting,
put it
or do you
together
feel
as a-
like this is ready to be voted on tonight and it's in your
Yeah,
final?
I mean, as long as we have what Sasha talked about, the additional language about whether something's on or off campus, and then whether it applies to students who are eighth graders participating in our athletic program. I mean, I could add that language if you guys want to vote on that. I'm also happy to put together a package of other changes, proposed changes to bring to you at a later date.
So how do people feel on taking a position on it tonight with the added language about sort of location and the eighth grade participating in interscholastic sports tonight?
In general, I'm okay with the way that it's written. I still have outstanding legal questions about how we're handling reporting of issues outside of school activity and school grounds that
Yeah,
I'd
so
like
that
to make
got
sure we're addressed.
Verified, I thought.
So the question that I asked legal counsel point blank was, is this legal and is it enforceable? And the response back from legal counsel was, yes, it is. But I didn't get into the particulars in terms of any nuances of what happens if.
Yeah, I'll say again, I'm supportive of this. The reporting on activity of minors, of things that happen outside of the school grounds, is my question. That I would like to clarify that.
Just a point of information, there was not like a huge sense of urgency to have this finalized, but students were concerned that we didn't want to have something happen and have the old policy still in place. So they wanted to have something like this done quickly, just in case, for what it's worth.
Do you have,
Prom and graduation coming up.
would you potentially have the rest of the handbook changes in a couple weeks, in a month?
2 weeks,
2 weeks. I mean, like May 16th potentially, you
2 weeks,
could
4
come back.
weeks?
2 weeks
I
or
don't know.
4 weeks?
Yeah.
2 weeks or 4 weeks would be the meetings.
We'll endeavor to get that together. I'll be in touch with Laura about our progress.
Okay. We do it in the spring typically, right? Not in the fall, okay. So what do others think?
I agree with Sasha. I just feel like the clarity is tough. I just feel like there's too much, this is for that person and this is for that person, and it's hard to, I don't know. I think I have a problem with the presence. But it's just my thought.
But that's not a,
It sounds like the change that you would make is adding Sasha's language about on or off campus. Clarify, it doesn't sound like in the presence of underage drinking is something you would consider removing from this.
No, because I think it would represent a substantial step back from what our previous enforcement policy was. It just wasn't written down. I mean, it's already more lenient than it was before we were enforcing before, which was in the presence of 25% of your season, no questions asked. And now it's in the presence of first offense, 4-hour community service project. Second offense, 1 game. And as I said before, there hasn't once been a second offense during the same school year since I've been here.
Perhaps what you could do, just clarify that is in the presence of Diana's question around, do you need to be in the presence of someone that was cited or not? And if you clarify there, that is part of this as well.
we said no. I thought we said no. It doesn't have to be someone
But
who's,
to note that in this paragraph, in the presence of, to explicitly state that.
Right.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful,
It's like
just to
please
clarify that a
note,
little more.
there does not need to be a charge of in possession or under the influence for this, for someone to be determined in the presence of.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get that complaint.
Yeah.
Nobody was charged.
Well, they were in the presence of, according to a police report that says these students were present at an underage drinking party.
right, so that's the offense, and that's what they're being punished for. So to me, it should be irrelevant if someone else is there and gets charged, but.
Up to you guys. I'm just presenting what our
I
council's
know, and I'm
worked
trying
on
to
for several
kind
months.
of wrap
so.
our, so I mean, an option in the presence of, in the underlined part, where it says in the presence of underage drinking or drug use, we could say, comma, regardless of anyone was charged, comma. As an option.
Again, how is it determined? Is this a conversation you've had with the police department, like which ones are coming across your desk and which ones aren't? Like, is that a bigger goal to strive for, just so there is consistency, or?
I'd like to work with the police department about the consistency of enforcement, yes.
Okay.
Like I said before, my concern is when stuff comes to my desk, I just need to have language I can point to.
I have to speak my conscience here. We've just spent 45 minutes talking about a policy that's aimed at protecting kids, and we're looking for loopholes to make it okay that kids are at underage drinking parties that are supported by the community and perhaps maybe not reported by the police. What are we doing? What are we doing as a town? How about we start talking about, let's not have underage drinking parties and support them at our houses? That's the issue here, folks. We're trying to protect kids. I've buried too many kids in my career because of underage drinking parties. Not okay. And whether the police are reporting it to us or not, I don't know what the police are doing or how they're operating. But we're trying to develop a policy here to protect our kids and send the message to our kids, because maybe parents aren't, that underage drinking is not okay. I have to say that. School council, thank you for your work on this. John, thank you.
I thank you as well, but at the same time, Dr. Blake, I think it's okay for us to try and wrap our heads around this policy. Right? And clearly, we're trying to wrap our heads around this policy. So I don't think it's wrong of us to simply try and get our arms around this thing, right? I understand that this is maybe coming across as condoning something we shouldn't be condoning. We think we've all been very clear that that is not the case.
Right.
Right? But there's lived experience and there's policy, and I want to make sure, I think we all are trying to make sure that those two are working in concert, not opposite each other.
I think this is a way also to protect the kids. So with all due respect, I feel like that to make us feel that we're not doing this from our heart and with care and to protect the kids was tough to hear. But I mean, I agree with you, like that there shouldn't be anything. But we still have to put our head around this policy. I think it's important.
Can I just have one more point? So, back in December, there was just down the road, there was an underage drinking party where a sexual assault happened. And so, that girl's life has changed. The boy's life has changed. That could be prevented, because when kids who are 14, 15, 16 years old are under the influence, they make bad decisions. And teenagers already make bad decisions.
Right.
So I think that we just, as Dr. Blake said, we can't have a policy that in any way even implies that we think it's okay or that it's acceptable.
Right, but it also can't be implied that school committee members that are trying to understand this policy and wrap their head around it condone underage drinking, because that is absolutely not the case.
I
And I
feel as
started
though
this
we're.
off by saying thank you, John, for the work. This took a lot of work.
Well,
I think this policy does it. You know, I think the couple of additions that Sasha's suggested, I think make it more clear. It doesn't change the substance of it. And I think the easiest thing would have been to just say, it's within our discretion to say possession is 25% ban. And you guys have not done that. You've actually been more precise and kind of making those, again, those tiers of infractions and not being unfair to the students. And I would recommend that the school committee adopt this with the modifications that Sasha's proposed.
I agree.
Is that a motion, or is that just a
Not,
recommendation?
because I don't think it's ready,
No.
is my understanding, but
Okay.
maybe that can be guidance of what comes forward with the full handbook revisions.
I agree with you as well. I like the progression, the progressive
Yeah.
element to all this. I think that really is a nice step forward, and thank you for doing all that work.
And I do think it's a lot more clear, but it gives you some, and I don't think, it gives you some flexibility, but I think the flexibility is in the the repercussions, and I think it's okay to have that leniency, depending on, what student's involved in, what impacts the community, what impacts the team, and. Okay, so,
Maybe I'll suggest with those edits, we can review those between this meeting and our next one. We can add it to the agenda for our next meeting to review and approve.
I think it will be part of the full handbook changes
okay,
if
so
there
that's
are any
already-
others. So we will revisit it at the next meeting or the meeting after, whenever those are ready. I think as a whole, with the other changes.
Maybe just one question. You alluded to students wanting something sooner rather than later. Is it the intent that that this policy, when voted, would become effective?
yes.
So we may want to do it prior to proms and graduation parties and those things?
Then we have to
Do you,
because from May 20,
if we approve it, it still needs to be signed by parents and students. It wouldn't be in effect right
I
away,
don't think it
right?
can go into effect right away because we signed off in the handbook for 23, 24.
That's true, yeah, it would be for next
It wouldn't
year.
go into effect
Yeah, it
till
would be
next year
next year.
either way, I
Take,
think.
take the time.
True.
So,
Take it back then. I think, with the regular handbook cycle of changes.
yeah, to approve them in the spring and then it gets incorporated into the next.
So I'll just make it public that if there is some kind of incident, I would probably follow this, because I don't think there's a parent out there say, no, really, I want you to throw the book at my kid. So, if there's some kind of incident for the rest of the school year, I'll follow this with the recommendations. If something, hopefully not, happens in the next couple weeks.
All right, thank you very much for
Thank
working
you.
on this,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night, thank you.
You too. Okay, next up on our agenda is discussion and potential vote to increase the capital fund limit for the Crest Collaborative. So in your folders is a document. There's two documents.
Yep. So you should have in your folder the letter from Crest Collaborative, Bob Jacola, the executive director there, as well as the second document I put in this afternoon was their capital plan. Essentially, we're members of the Crest Collaborative. We send special education students to that collaborative. We've been members there for a long time now. Essentially, they currently have a fund limit of $650,000 on their capital fund. And it has to be voted on by each of the school districts that belong to the collaborative to increase or make significant changes. So because they're anticipating having to do some significant upgrades in future years, they're simply asking for school districts that are members to vote to increase the capital fund limit from $650,000 to $2 million. They're not asking for any additional funding for the, any additional funding from districts to get to that $2 million mark or anything like that. They're just looking to basically extend the limits of the plan.
Maybe I missed this, but could you tell us where the money for capital funds comes?
Yep.
from?
So there's a fee that we paid up front years ago to support and become members of that. And just like school districts, they develop an annual budget, and at the end of the year, if there's a budget surplus, the budget surplus is typically put into the capital fund, and unless it reaches a limit, then it's covered under law that they would have to give money back to the school districts. I think that's happened once in the 7 years that I'm here, and it ended up, because of the number of students that we send there, I think we got like literally a couple $100 back. Wasn't a significant amount of money. Whereas other districts that are sending 20, 30 kids there, it ends up being a significant amount. But typically, whatever's left, whatever their surplus is, and I don't know what the surplus was last year off the top of my head, because that'll be the first question you're going to ask me as I say that out loud. That it goes into their capital fund so that they have money in reserve for future use.
And I had asked Brian to put in their capital plan presentation, which is the other document in your folder, so it outlines, because I was just curious if, like Whittier, they have like an $11 million subject program or something in their future, but, so skimming this capital project, if you get down to slide, I don't know, halfway down, project summary, it gives you sort of the immediate needs and then forecasting out FY '25 to FY '30. There's a lot of TBDs, but so it's a little hard to know. But I wanted to make sure we didn't get into a Whittier situation, even though I know we're not giving them money, but, that they didn't come back in a few years and say, oh, we want to build a new building and.
So are we being asked to potentially vote on allowing that fund to increase? Did I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's $650,000 right now. They're asking to up it to 2 million, just so they
But
can.
not a request for capital, just increasing the limit.
Correct, so they can
Yeah, just-
they can pocket away more money.
I want to say increasing the credit limit.
Yeah.
if you
Gotcha.
will,
Okay.
But they're not asking us to fund anything. It's just a matter of saying, instead of capping it out at 650,000, you're allowed to have 2 million up to 2 million in the bank.
Can we see any good reason why that wouldn't be a bad thing?
I don't.
Yeah, I'm searching for one, but I can't see it, but I'm always cognizant of my blind spots there too.
Orchestra's about to come out, I figure I'll shuffle.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions about this? Seems like a reasonable request to me. And they need, what, 2/3 of the member communities
Yep.
to approve this to make it happen. And there's 16, I believe.
I would move to support an increase of the capital fund limit for Crest Collaborative to $2 million.
Second?
Okay, moved by Jeff, second by Matt. Any other discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
you.
Next up, FEPI distribution approval. Every year, we get the FEPI disbursement amount. So we got a letter. It's usually this time of year because they use the third quarter through March 31st. So they usually give us the letter in April with the distribution for the following year. So the letter, I believe, is in your folder from the FEPI group. They will make this distribution to us on or before June 30th. Tom made us a little spreadsheet. Okay, Tom made us a little sheet. So very pleased to announce the FEPI's distribution to the schools for FY25 will be $1,053,412. So typically, we subtract the portion that's, well, it's broken into the Manning Award and the Payne grant money, which gets split between the Payne grants and the Twig grants. So if we start with the $1,053,000, subtract the Manning fund, which is a little under $17,000, and that's the one that rotates schools every year for library. So that will go to the middle school, high school next year, which leaves us with $1,036,726. So typically, we, at this meeting, vote to accept that money. And then we also take an additional vote on sort of splitting the remaining funds after we take the Manning out, splitting between, we typically give 75% to the FEPI grants and 25% to the FIG grants, and Twig grants, rather. So those are outlined in this sheet as well. So that, if we did the 75-25 split, we would have basically $778,000 for Payne grants and $259,000 for Twig grants. And that's over, the Twig grants would need to be split into there's two cycles of Twig grants. So that is Beppy's update.
So this is the first time it's crossed $1 million threshold, correct?
I believe it was over $1 million last
Was it
year.
over-
No, this year it did as well.
Was this the first year?
This was, FY
This first
'24
year,
was the
yeah.
first year.
Amazing.
It's amazing. So, and just of note, they usually send us, or they did, I apologize, they did send us a projection in October of an estimated amount, and then we get this final amount in April. Usually that estimated amount goes in the FinCom booklet, but somehow I wasn't looped into the email, or something happened, so you got it. So that number's not in the FinCom booklet, but it's okay. Because now we have the final number. So I guess I'm Want to make sure no one has any questions? If not, I think we should move to support approving these funds, or accepting these funds.
I would move to accept a gift from the Feffy's trust distribution of $1,053,412.
Second.
Moved by Jeff, second by Jenny. Any other discussion? All in favor? Yes, Tom,
No,
question,
no, I'm
sorry.
not voting.
He's not voting.
The
Question, Tom.
8?
Question is the committee's intention to maintain the 75-25 split?
It's
I
going to
think
be a
that's a
separate vote.
second
Fair
vote.
enough.
Yes, we
My
accept
bad.
the
Fair
funds
enough.
and
Thank
then
you.
we talk the distribution, but, yeah. So motion and second on the table. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor? You, 7-0.
That dollar amount is amazing, to your point. And we're just so fortunate to
Oh my
have that
gosh.
available to us. And the projects that I've seen and initially signed off on to send to the committees have been amazing this year. So it'd be great to see what comes back to us. But thank you to the Feffys and their management of the fund.
Yeah, they do an excellent job and are very transparent. I think we got the chance to meet Walter, one of the Feffys, a month or so ago. Also of note, Dick Fates is the current chair, and his term is up, so we will need to, they're helping sort of look into possible people that we could appoint to fill his slot, because he's at the end of his second term. So that will happen, I believe, in June. But we should probably send him a nice thank you note. But yeah, it's great. So moving on to the split, again, historically, we've given 75 to the Feffy funds because those are bigger dollar amounts, and 25% to the FIG, I keep saying the FIG, the TWIG funds. I don't have reason to think we should change that at this point, but.
I have a question.
You go first.
For the TWIG grants, what is the cap for each individual grant? What's the limit? 5,000?
7,500
yep.
was increased to, I think, a year or two ago,
Okay.
and 2 cycles.
Okay.
So there's a spring cycle and a fall cycle for that.
Okay.
My question, I'm more familiar with the pain grants, not the twigs. So my question is, are those, do we usually hit that max with the applications?
I'm sorry?
Do the applications hit the max distribution for the twig grants?
Some years they've come very close. I don't recall that we've had a year where we've needed more funds in the twig grants. It's usually the pain grants that, if anything is going to exceed, it's going to be the pain grants.
But we're not returning like twig money either.
No, and I think if no, I don't believe we have.
Sounds like we're where we need to be. Yeah.
Just to add specificity, so this year, for fiscal '24, with the pain grants, we are under the allowance by about $1,800.
Oh.
So there will be if it goes on plan, meaning spending on plan through the rest of the year, we'll have a very small surplus.
Thank you.
Questions or a motion?
I think it makes sense to maintain a 75-25 split, and I would make a motion to dedicate $777,544.50 to the pain grant and $259,181.50 to the Twig Innovation Grant Funds.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Jen. Further discussion? All in favor? Okay, 7-0. Thank you. That's great. So I will let him know. Okay. All right, onto policy update. From Diana, there's a policy folder with many
So many
policies.
Many policies.
What are?
Policy committee has been busy the last 2 meetings. I think it's been 2 meetings since we've
16.
brought
Seems to be.
policies, right?
Some of these policies make you go cross-eyed too, if I remember,
Yeah, but luckily,
but
nothing
hopefully.
is. All right, I'm going to just go down the list. Like always, stop me if you have questions. I have 2 that I'm going to stop on. BDB, minor rewording. BDD, minor rewording. EDE, this one, our plan at the subcommittee was to kind of have a bigger discussion here, now that we got some more information. It refers to subcommittees will have a list of responsibilities versus what our current practice has been, which is to make goals for each subcommittee. The MASC wording was that there's a list. We were investigating if there was a list. We have not been able to find a list, so the question is, do we want to change to making a list of responsibilities for the subcommittees, or stay with what we've been doing, which is, each subcommittee makes their own set of goals?
In our policy subcommittee discussion, I seem to recall that years ago, there was a separate list of the different subcommittees, but we can't find it in the office anywhere, and all we have is what's listed on the chart that we currently use at the top of each subcommittee, that little blurb that says what the subcommittee does. But I thought that there was something, maybe I'm losing my marbles.
I mean, I've never seen anything
But,
besides this.
So we have, just what we have now, the budget subcommittee assists the administration and finance department in creation of the school budget. Just basically says exactly what they do, but I thought there was something, a more involved document. We can't find it.
I mean, only budget and communications, in my experience, has come up with goals, per se. In my recollection.
No, I think didn't we come up with them for FEFIs? I thought this year we were on it with goals.
I mean, FEPIS isn't FEPIS isn't, we just talking subcommittees? Because we're not
true.
talking working
Yeah.
groups and.
Yeah,
Like, I don't think mutual concerns, it comes up with goals or policy or ops or
Policy
negotiations.
did.
Policy did? Okay.
yeah, to get through our policies.
Yeah.
Thinking
Well,
of-
the policy, the goals of the policy subcommittee, I think the main goal is to follow the policy that says we have to review the policy.
Like I said, you go cross-eyed
Right,
on this.
and make use of our 3-year cycle, so.
I don't personally feel strong either way. If we do go with the list of functions, we will have to create a list of functions. Versus if we keep the wording the way it was, we kind of go to what we've been doing, so.
For some of them. I just don't want to now have to make SMART goals for other ones. I mean, we're making school committee goals anyways, which are going to incorporate almost always budget,
Yeah.
probably often communications. I don't know. I don't really think we need wording on goals in here. I mean, just because we can still do it. Don't have
Yeah.
to do it.
So do you want to keep it a list of its functions and duties, and that is the simple list we have?
Sure.
Okay.
And
Everybody.
these could be fleshed out a little bit more too. I mean, the policy one could say,
Yeah.
stay on track with 3-year review cycle or something.
Sounds like a summer workshop event. Okay. So we'll go with what's recommended in the edits there. Sounds like, okay.
It's my thought, but I mean, if anyone's scared.
I have one other comment on BDE. So it looks like it's a change from the chair being able to make the compositions of the subcommittees to the school committee.
The school committee
Yeah,
shall appoint
It's
members.
usually a chair duty.
Yeah, good catch. It is the chair.
It should be.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't remember that one. I thought we were. Okay. That, I think, was it. Thanks. There was something about if the chair designated the chair of each subcommittee, so that.
Could be the
might have-
chair or their designee. We could put that.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I think there was another area that we wanted to adjust, and that wasn't it, so. Anyways, all set, thanks. All right, where were we? BDE. Okay, BDF. This one we changed a little bit. We reworded the language on the tenure of committee members to allow the school committee to decide on each advisory committee because they are a little different. And we also looked into what qualifies as an advisory committee, and that's basically any committee that the school committee makes.
School
Points.
committee.
Yeah. Any questions there? Okay, moving on. So there were 2 policies that were turned into one policy, and then that policy was then merged into another policy. I can get more specific if you want to, but there were, other than title changes and mergers, there were no, like, practice changes.
What do they relate to?
It was BDFAE 1 and 2, and then BDFAE, and then there was a other version of BDFAE. And those are all,
All related to school council and school improvement plans?
yes. Yep, exactly.
So the yellow is additions? Oh, wait.
This one is, so if you look at the yellow, this one's going away. Hold on.
Which is the big one that's staying?
So see how there's 2 BDFAEs? The one without the yellow staying, but the yellow wording, is wording that did not get carried over, but it's in other places.
And these revisions are all MASC.
Mm-hmm.
These school improvement plans, like substantial changes, need to be run by the administrators because they're the one that make the school improvement plans, or are they not substantive
Which one are you on?
enough? I'm still on BDFAE. The one with all the pink in it.
And what is your question?
I don't know, I just don't like to approve things that other people have to do without running by them. Like, is this, or maybe these are just little edits, but if they're substantially changing anything about school improvement plans,
No, it got
we need to let the
moved
principals know.
over from other ones.
Okay. So it's just consolidation, but not a major change in content?
Right.
Okay.
Did we change the November? Dr. Blake, was that your recommendation to put the first November meeting? Which I think matches our practice. It had said something different in the policy, but our practice was that
Yes.
the presentations happen in November. Or by November. All right, I'm gonna move on.
Is there anything about tenure for school council members in any of the deleted policies or the merged policies? I think it's been inconsistent about whether there are term limits or whether they're not.
Vote. think that, I don't know that, does that live with us, or would that be one of their policies?
I don't know. I think my only experience was with Winthrop, and I think at that point, people rolled off
Yeah.
after 2 years. But I think in the high school, they tend to be the same composition of people year to year, except for the students, which change, so.
Yeah. I don't know, do you,
Term at Winthrop.
would that,
But I don't know, I don't know if I could have gone on. Well, my kids left, so I didn't, but I don't know. I don't know if that's in our,
Well, I think John alluded to it earlier, that one of his school
Yeah.
council members has been on for,
For 7 or 8 years. Yeah.
yeah, as long as he's been here, which is,
Yeah, and I think it's sort of the same teachers and staff that
Yeah.
have been there for a long
Right.
time.
Yeah.
Which is good that it's a
Right.
group that works well together, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have an opportunity for sort of new voices and people that are entering that school building for the first time, so.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's state law or regulation or district policy or council policy that determines that, or administrator's preference.
want to look into it?
Yeah, I'll try to report back before next week, but it doesn't change the policy language, but.
great.
well, nothing's been removed in any of these, so, I mean, that we can't see, right? So they're crossed through, but if it's in there, or if it was in there, it's still there, and we,
And if MASC didn't add anything to that, I would suspect it's
Yeah, it's just,
not a requirement or not in our purview. Because we have nothing to do with who goes on school council.
all right. BDG, minor rewording, BE, minor rewording, BEC, no changes for BEDA. BEDB, we reworded the language on the timing of the availability of supporting materials for our meetings. That, it says ideally no less than 3 business days prior to the meeting or as soon as possible, because as we all know, sometimes we'll maybe have a policy meeting or a communications meeting the night before our regularly scheduled meeting. Any questions there? Okay.
Yeah, I think if it has those caveats in it, because we do our best.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
All right. And then we have minor reformatting and rewording for BEDD, BEDF, and BEDG.
Just reading that note at the bottom of the last one about the minutes. Okay. How close are you to the end of your cycle?
We're supposed to have 2 more meetings, but they're heavy, so we'll see.
we're gonna get it done.
We're gonna get it done.
Oh, yeah.
We'll get there.
We've got really good momentum.
We're gonna have a party.
Celebrate.
You need one.
He's gonna bring muffins.
I'll bring muffins.
I guess we're not remote.
Yeah,
I know, wear our shirts.
can't remote.
I think we should all wear our shirts to like our last meeting.
I completely agree.
Town meeting?
With a tie for you.
TBD. Okay, thank you, Diana. Oh, wait, did we get a motion to approve said policies? Jeff, you're on a roll.
Motion to approve policy updates. Do I need to, I don't need to do the,
As presented this
as
evening.
presented by the policy subcommittee.
Seconded.
All right, moved by Jeff, second by Matt. Further discussion? All in favor? Great, thank you.
Jimmy?
Night, Jenny.
Night, Jimmy.
All right, superintendent's administrative report.
Okay. Yes, thank you. It's been a while since our last meeting, and a lot has transpired. Since our last meeting, we had a prep session for negotiations on April 5th, and then we had bean counting on a lovely Saturday morning, April 6th. Got to hang out together for coffee and donuts and lots of great talk about our budgets. I entertained a group of music educators from Pentucket Regional School District who wanted to see how our programming worked from the elementary level through the high school level. As you might recall, I had a few superintendent colleagues. We've been visiting each other's districts, and the superintendent from Pentucket was very impressed and was wanting to make some changes to the programming over there. So he asked if he could bring a group of his music educators from his district over. So we visited the different schools and got to talk with folks, and they got to understand how our scheduling and things work. And it's, I think the way our schedule works in each of the buildings is a major factor, but also the people that we have in place, I think, is the bigger factor, because we have people that work in each building separately and together. So Marissa is doing the strings lessons at the elementary levels, but then she sees them again when they come up here. And Jamie Fremont Smith, same thing with the band. He sees them in the elementary schools, but also sees them up here. So I think that contributes to the strength of our programs. Tom Gallagher and I met for our athletic update. Spent a considerable amount of time the week of April 8th, meeting with staff members regarding a personnel issue, which we talked about earlier. That week, we also conducted all of the interviews for the Director of Student Services. We had negotiations on April 11th. I also met with our tech director and Amy Gregory to review the tech plans again that they had presented to the school committee prior to that, and just looking at the technology plans, or plans for technology moving forward in the district. That week, we also had policy and communications subcommittee. The North Shore Roundtable, Superintendent's Roundtable, is preparing our legislative luncheon agenda for May. And that week, I also spent a considerable amount of time, obviously, up at the Paul F. Doyon School. During vacation week, met with legal counsel around these issues. Bev, spent time with her reviewing some of the special ed programming, and John Mitchell for a couple of different purposes. It was another, actually, I think that was vacation week too, that we had the negotiations planning meeting, one late afternoon. And then I took the opportunity to have coffee with Haley Rist, who's running for school committee. She had sent me an email and wanted to sit down and have a cup of coffee, so I joined her at Zoomies for coffee. Last week, I took some much-needed vacation time. This week, we're right back into it with agenda planning, pulling my evaluation materials together, and attending an event for Amada in the Brooks and Peter McPhail Memorial Fund. It was a very moving evening here out in the lobby of the PAC. Our admin meeting this week focused on the end-of-year concerns, including scheduling, activities, and we spent a lot of time talking about the closing out of the budget. Tom and I met with the EDP director, Alicia Merry, to begin developing her budget for next year. Now that she's been with us for almost a full year, she's making some recommendations for programmatic changes that we want to that we want to include as she considers, the necessity of a price increase for the program. Yesterday, I attended the Multilingual Learners Showcase. That was last night. It was fantastic. The students did a wonderful job. Parents and students all contributed food from their cultures to the celebration. I'd have to say there was probably about 100 people, maybe a little bit more, in attendance. And it was just great to sit with the different families and hear their stories and talk to the kids. So it was a great evening. So, and here we are today.
If possible, I'd love to be invited to that multilingual learners. I don't know if any other school committee members would want to attend, but I think it seems like an interesting event, so.
Yep.
I wouldn't-
So they do, I think, so we did a multicultural fair during the day in the fall. That was part of the DEI work that's been ongoing. And last year, Gabby Arshimbo, Miss Arch, started this multilingual learners or leaders club, and they actually do a lot of leadership work around the school in terms of helping tutor kids and translations and things like that for, non-meetings, but helping kids that are, newcomers, et cetera, and working with the staff. So great group of kids, great EL teachers that we have on board. So we're very fortunate.
Regarding the EDP program, so you were saying that you're discussing potential costs. What are the
Yes,
issues there? And specifically, we carry about $375,000 in an account there.
Yep.
And
So
you're
we're,
trying to offset.
so we're looking, so we're looking at, now that she's been there almost a full year, she's looking at what other programmatic changes she can make. Essentially, the program's been run the same way since Wilma was there, and then we had the year and a half off with COVID. And now with her in the program, there's some different programming that she wants to bring in that's going to be an added expense. She's talking about instituting field trips again, because years ago, pre-COVID, Wilma used to run some field trips for kids. They used to go roller skating and things. So we had that conversation with her. We were also looking at her staffing patterns. So I don't know if or how much of an increase there might be. We have started to offset some of the expense for running the program after school in the appropriated budget with EDP funds, and that's something that we've done the last couple of years. So,
Yeah, I would just, depending on what the increase is, whether it's for programming or whether it's for optional field trips,
Yep.
I would want to be hesitant of asking parents to contribute more money for care. It's a huge expense
Yep.
for families, so.
Yep.
All right, other questions for Dr. Blake? I feel like I had one, but I lost it. I don't want to make you go through everything again, but. All right, moving on to subcommittee working groups and liaison reports.
FEs will meet next week, but we haven't met since the last meeting, but we hope to have some,
You're talking FEFI, I'm thinking IEF.
Uh-oh. yeah.
We're on that one together.
We're on that one together, yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, we're hoping to have something maybe just for the committee to ponder at their next meeting, but we've also talked about some of the bigger issues that have come up might require a grander discussion with the whole committee. But we continue to chug away.
Yeah, so we can put you on the agenda for next meeting, and then I think that'd be a great summer retreat
Yeah.
conversation, maybe.
And IEF did not meet on Monday since no one really could make the meeting and everybody was late, and so we had that be postponed.
So we heard from policy, just a heads up, operations will need to meet before the end of the school year to onboard a new school committee member. So just stay tuned for that. And the election's a little late, so, you know, it'll be, the election's not till May 21st, and then, so it might be a tight timeline, end of May, beginning, first couple weeks of June, to have an onboarding meeting.
Twig met this past Tuesday,
Okay.
and we discussed, obviously, the grant requests, waiting on, which I believe we got tonight, the amount that Twig has to present, to hand out. So I can provide that
Okay.
to, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and do that. Yeah.
So if you will provide that.
Yep.
And then Diana, could you provide the amount to Pain Grant Committee Chair? Yes? Okay. Thank you.
Oh, they also wanted to, I'm thinking that the FEFIs would be the right group to go to regarding, we want to get something in writing, and unless there is something, to sort of outline the parameters and the, the repeating ones, how many times can they apply, or not apply, but how many times can they be given the money to get something more that we can say, this is it.
So
So
there's not really a rubric as much for the twigs as
there is,
So
but.
I think the question, to clarify your point, so they're similar to the pain grants, where we have a number of pain grants that are repetitive every year. We have the field trip grant every year,
Yeah.
for example. There are a number of twig grants that have been annual as well. For example, the Kinder Swim program that we started 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, has always been funded through the twig grants.
Right.
And so the committee, I believe, is asking for some
Yeah.
guidance around at what point does that change, or is it okay that continues?
Yeah.
So it's a fair question. I think
Yeah.
that's for the,
For the
Yeah,
FEFIs,
yeah, and that does kind of dovetail
Yeah.
with some of the conversations we've been having,
Yeah,
so.
so we can talk next meeting.
Yeah.
And that could trickle up to the pain committee. I mean, if we get the field trip one every year.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it might be different. Field trip one every year. We sort of have consolidated field trip funds.
right. And it takes away from, one takes away from the
I don't
other.
think we should
Yeah,
approve it.
no,
I
no,
don't
no,
know.
no, understood.
It's
yeah.
something for discussion.
Yeah.
There are also pain grants
Yeah,
that get
yeah.
funded
I
every
think
year.
that's one of the bigger conversations that
Yeah.
the FEFI's working group needs to have, and we've sort of nibbled around the edges of it, but that is a big question, because as that fund grows, there are continued needs that we know full well that we're never going to be able to support
Right.
in an annual budget.
Mhm.
And so by having some parameters around the FEFI's money, whether it be the pain grants or the Traversa Weatherall grants, we may take some of that heat off.
Yeah.
So maybe at your next FEFI policy meeting, you could, if maybe there's a running list of things that we could start to build a list of things to discuss at our summer retreat.
Yeah, I think that's
a good idea.
one of the big chunky ones that it's such a important question, and it's
Big
a big decision.
Decision.
Yeah, and so we want to get it right.
Right, yeah. So. Negotiations will meet again on May 13th. Climate resiliency met. Budget just met. Is that what you're saying? Budget just met right before this. We talked about end of year closeout stuff. We talked about budget-related town meeting articles, making sure that stuff's lined up for that. So I may be reaching out to a couple of you. Also reaching out to Carol Sullivan, who's presenting the Whittier Tech article. But I guess my general request for that is if you want information from Tom, you know, numbers, account balances, information that you might need, you know, either for a presentation at town meeting or for your back pocket at town meeting, in case questions come up, I guess, try to get those to him in a timely manner so he can get those to us well in advance of town meeting.
Yep, so I believe Laura shared the folder out today.
She did not.
She did not? Okay, everything is there. I thought she did. So folks should have the complete evaluation folder. What I did was I did a summative self-evaluation this year. That's in there, and then there is, for school committee use, superintendent summative evaluation is a Word document, a PDF if you want to print it out and fill it out, the evaluation rubric, and a copy of my goals.
Yeah, so if that could go out in the morning.
I will message her right now.
So that will give folks a week. If you need that following weekend, if you get the folder tomorrow, Friday, May 3rd, I would love to have your evaluations by the following Friday, May 10th. If you have a good argument for waiting until the 12th, I will consider it. But then I need to take your individual evaluations, pull them into a summative evaluation. And it's not a good week. So I have negotiations, there's town meeting, potentially town meeting number 2, and then a meeting. So I'll be taking a work day off for that. But the sooner you can get me your individual evaluations. For new folks, it is a bit cumbersome and confusing, so feel free. I did send you the blank one a couple weeks ago, as well as a guidance document from Desi about how to fill it out. But if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me or Jeff if you need assistance. You can print it out and write it in. You can edit the PDF. You can save it. Every year it's like, how do I fill in the boxes? It's confusing, but let me know if you have questions. And then, again, the plan is for me to do that summative eval the week of the 12th, read it into the record on the 16th. I think we're probably good for other groups. New business?
One item. There's been a couple of fights at the middle school and high school recently.
Yep.
I know that the principals have addressed those with the parents. In this specific incidents, some of that is, some of the videos are circulating. It's creating, I imagine you and they have heard, a broader concern of the environment. I just want to make sure that that's being communicated to you and to the principals as well. And they're taking measures to address that beyond the specific incidents. I think it would also be helpful to communicate back to parents what's going on there and the steps that the administrative staff and the teachers are taking as well to understand what's going on.
Yep. Thank you.
Vouchers and bills should be all set. We have no consent agenda this evening, so motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Diana, second by Jeff. All in favor? Thank you. Good night.